Okay? So that is the loony part. Loony means something else. I didn't want to. So, so the months are the synodic months, and the year is at an average the solar year. Individual years are not solar years, but the average year is the solar year. So how do they manage that? Well, some years have 12 months, some have 13. So they introduce a whole extra month sometimes to keep the average length of the year. What are the examples? Well, almost all calendars in the world are lunisolar calendars. Okay? So if you just give me a random name, even before, let's say you are playing Ke Hobe Banglar Kotipoti, okay? And somebody gives you a calendar, the person gives you the name of a calendar and says, is this a lunar, solar, lunisolar? You don't know what it is. Bet on lunisolar. 99 times out of 100 you will be correct. Of course, before that you will be thrown out of the game, but that's a different thing. Okay, so the calendars of northern and western India, Chinese calendar, Hebrew calendar, Greek calendar, Babylonian calendar, just name it. There are so many names. Anyway, so there are these three different types of calendars. And what I will do in the rest of this talk is that I will take some examples of these different types of calendars and show how they have evolved in time. So my first example is the Roman calendar. It's a solar calendar in its present form, but it was not always so. I will give more details. Actually, the calendar was borrowed from Egypt. The Egyptians were sun worshippers. So they had a solar calendar. And the calendar was brought over from Egypt. I will give you more detail when it was brought over, by whom, etc., etc. This is the calendar which has evolved to become the international calendar. And this is the only thing in the world that everybody in the world agrees to. One person announces a war against another country. One country announces a war against another country, and then they want to go to a treaty table. Both sides will go by the Gregorian calendar. That part is undisputed. Okay? So this is the only thing that the world agrees on, which is a nice thing, of course. But of course, you wish that they had agreed on other things. And this is the calendar which is commonly known as the English calendar in India. That's a very, 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 very bad name. I will explain why. But let me make a request to you. If there is only one thing that you want to take out from this talk this evening, just don't use the phrase English calendar for at least 3 months from now. Okay? That's it. Okay, I'll come back to it. So, how was Roman calendar? Long time ago, before Numa Pompilius. Who was Numa Pompilius? Numa Pompilius was a ruler in Rome, an emperor, you can say. Before Numa was around 700 before Christ, 700 BC. So before that time, this is how the calendar looked like. The first month was Martius. If you translate into English, it's March. That had 31 days. Aprilis, 30 days. Maius, 31 again. Junius, 30. These 4 names are by some gods and goddesses of Rome at that time. Then came the month Quintilis. Quinque in Latin means 5. So quintilis is the 5th month. And then the next month is called sextilis. We cannot talk about sex very much here, apart from saying that sex in Latin means 6. Okay. If it means something else in any other language, please don't think about that now. So it was the 6th month, and it had 30 days. And then September, Saptam. In Sanskrit, the word that is Saptam in Latin was septem. September. These languages were related in long past. Ashto was October, 8th month. Navam, November. Dasham, December, December. It was pronounced December at that time. Anyway, so 31 or 30, 31 or 30. All months had 31 or 30. And the total, as you see, was 304. And it was only 10 months, as you probably have noticed as well. So 10 months, 304 days. So why 304? Did the Romans not know that 304 days don't make a year? Yeah, of course they knew. But the point is, what happens after December? It's winter, right? So who cares to measure month at that time? Just stay home. Okay? And then at some point, spring will come, the kings will go to invade other countries, and at that time people will go to work, and then March will come, Martius, and start counting again. I mean, this might seem funny, but this was my childhood. Okay, my childhood we also counted like this. I mean, in December, first week or so, final exams will be over. And then all days, it was cricket in the morning, cricket in the afternoon, badminton in the evening, and then sleep at night. And it goes on like this, and we had absolutely no idea which day of the week it was, what is the date on the calendar, etc., etc. So then, after 1 month or so, my mother would one day say, hey, you have to go to school today. Okay, the calendar starts. So this is what the Romans used to do. Now, this changed at the time of Numa. As I said, around 700 years before Christ. Numa introduced these 2 months and called them Januarius, Februarius. Martius was still the first month of the year. But just for your convenience and my convenience, I have put the January and February at the beginning. Okay. Now, let's start from Martius. The number of days, as you see, 31, 29, 31, 29, and so on. It was 31 and 29 all over. Why? What happened to 30? Well, the point is, around this time in Rome, people were, of course, very superstitious, and one thing they were very superstitious against is even numbers. They did not like even numbers. Okay? So they thought they are evil numbers actually, so they should be avoided. So all months were either 29 or 31. Except, of course, as you see, February. February has 28. That's an even number. Why is February even number? Because if you put February an odd number, then the total number of days become even in the year. Oh, that's very bad. Then the whole year is wasted. Okay? So they had an even number of days in February, 28, so that the total number of days in the year is 355. You see, this is roughly like the lunar year I was talking about before. Okay? So they tried to approximate that. They did not know the exact measure at that time very well. But they knew that 355 years doesn't make a solar year. So what they used to do is that after every alternate year, they used to add 20 or 22, 21, 22 days more to the year. They are not in any month. They are just extra days. and of course holidays. Okay, so they used to add these extra days. Now this was the problem. There was a lot of corruption. Okay, so the adding was not very, was not done in very systematic manner. Somebody wants, for some reason, okay, maybe his son wants to go abroad, but he is expecting a ship to come back from abroad, and that hasn't happened. And the son wants to go on the first day of the year. So he goes to the priest and said, "Can you please start the calendar 2 days later?" Okay, I will, of course. So, okay, 2 days later. So it started happening that way. And so everything became completely almost random, I should say, until it was noticed by Julius. Julius invaded Egypt, and while he was in Egypt, well, if you ask somebody like me who is not a specialist in history, what is the most important thing happened when Julius was in Egypt? Everybody will say, "Oh, Cleopatra, Cleopatra." This is what tabloids do for you. Okay, even tabloid history. That is not nearly the most important thing. Okay, the most important thing is that Julius made a person named Sosigenes, and nobody even knows the name of Sosigenes. Okay, so who was Sosigenes? Sosigenes was an astronomer in Egypt, and from him Julius learned the techniques of the calendar that was at that time prevalent in Egypt. And he was so impressed that when he came back to Rome, he brought Sosigenes with him. He didn't bring Cleopatra. He brought Sosigenes. Okay? And then he made a reform of the Roman calendar. So how did the calendar look after this reform? Okay, you see this superstition of even numbers, Julius says, forget it. This is completely irrelevant. Okay, so he started with March, again 31, and then April 30, 31, 30, 30. If you go through it, you will see this is just alternate 31, 30, 31, 30. Very beautiful scheme until you reach February, which is the last month. That if you make 30 again, then the total number becomes 366. That is not allowed because they knew at that time that it's more like 365. So since February is the end of the year, so whatever, things have to be adjusted, they have to be adjusted from February. So February was 29 days. And the total was 365 days. Sosigenes knew that the year is not 365 days. It's more than 365 days. At that time, they knew that it is 365 days, 6 hours exactly. Okay? So every 4 years, 1 day will have to be added somehow. So Julius also made this thing part of the ruling that he made. But that part contained some problem in the framing of the language, which I'll come to later. But he said that basically once in 4 years, you have to add 1 day. And when you add it, you should add it to February. So that on those years, February will also have 30 days. So it's a completely 31, 30, 31, 30 cycle. Very beautiful calendar. Okay? Now, after doing these things, Julius was very pleased with himself. I think he deserved to be pleased. And so he thought that the calendar should remember him also. So he made one change in the names of the calendar. The month, which was Quintilis before, he changed the name to Julius, which in English is July. Okay, Now, so this was the Julian Reform. Now, there is just one problem that remained with this reform, which I indicated a little while ago, that when will that extra day be added? And I don't know Latin to see the exact words and see how confusing it might have been, but it's something like this, that you see, suppose I say that I went to Delhi after 3 years. So what does that mean? Is it just 3 years difference between the last time and this time? Or is it that in the middle 3 years I did not go at all and this is the 4th year that I have come? Okay? So there are this kind of confusions that might arise. And it was something like this. So Julius basically said that after every 3rd year, add an extra day. And they misinterpreted. They thought that every 3rd year you will have to add the extra day. Okay? And by the way, I mean, all this thing, I mean, Julius's thing happened in 46 BC. By 44 BC, Julius was already out. He was murdered, right? So Julius was not there to correct the mistake, but they started adding it every 3 years. So the problem again started accumulating, and it was noticed 38 years later. Augustus was the emperor at that time, and 38 years have passed. If they had actually, they have actually observed the leap year every 4th year, then there would have been 9 leap years in the intervening period. But because they were doing it every 3rd year, there have been 12. So Augustus said that, I mean, it was realized, and Augustus said that, okay, I mean, we have these 3 days have been overcounted, so just forget about these 3 days, and from now on, it will be every 4th year which will have this extra day. And I mean, this is funny that just by doing this, Augustus thought that he has done enough, that there should be a month in his name. So he changed the name of the month Sextilis to his name, August. Okay. But he did something worse. He said Julius's month has 31 days. So how can, okay, so his month was given 31 days. And then to adjust the thing, you have to make all sorts of changes in the lengths of the months, so much so that now people have to remember a rhyme to know which month contains how many days. It is completely, anyway. The adjectives that are coming to my mind, I should not speak out. Okay, so from now on, it will be 1 day every 4th year, and because August has been made 31 days, 1 day have to be taken out from somewhere, and that was, of course, taken out from February. So February, which was almost like the other months in Julius's time, now becomes 28. And 29 in the leap year. Now, this thing, 1 extra day every 4 years. That means that the average year in the Julian calendar was 365 plus 1/4 days, 365.25. But the actual year, as I have told you before, is 365.2422. So there's a discrepancy of 0.0078 days, which means 11 minutes and 14 seconds. Now, is that serious? Well, it is, because this accumulates. So if this accumulates for 1,000 years, the discrepancy becomes multiplied by 1,000, it's 7.8 days, almost 8 days. Okay? And the calendar is supposed to go for many thousands of years. So it will keep accumulating and accumulating. And that's a disaster which was first actually noticed in 325 AD in a convention of Christian monks in Nicaea. And they noticed that the vernal equinox is not coming when it should come. So they said they did not really understand that this is the reason for the mismatch. So they said, okay, vernal equinox is 21st of March. So from now on, we should keep vernal equinox on 21st of March.
What's that? What's the vernal?
What is vernal equinox? I'm sorry. I should have mentioned that. Okay, vernal equinox is the day of the year when the daytime and the night time becomes equal. Okay, so that's the thing. We'll come about these measures a little later also. Yes.